Hi, my name's Tony Mossberg, and if you've ever experienced that handshake, that means you've come through the doors of DCC on a Sunday morning. On behalf of DCC Guest Services team, welcome.
Good morning, Dallas family. I'm Reagan Russell, a youth leader here at DCC, and I'm so happy to welcome you today. A couple of fun things are coming up. First is yoga with Emily Stapleton this Saturday, June 6th at 10 a.m. on Zoom. Click the Zoom links button at the top of our website, dallaschurch.org, to join. This Tuesday night from 8 to 8:30 p.m. is another Zoom Hang with Brad small group on the book of Jonah. These have been so great, so invite a friend. We're excited to see you there. DCC kids and parents, we know the school year is coming to an end, and our kids team has been brainstorming fun ways to engage your kids. Follow Dallas Kids on Facebook and on Instagram for new activities to do with your families. Our social medias are the best way for you to stay up to date with events and activities going on throughout the week. Thank you so much for your giving here at DCC. As a teenager, I learned the importance and the ways God works through giving. It was definitely hard to make the choice to set aside money from my income to give to the church, but quickly it became a cool opportunity for me to show my love and gratitude for what God has done. Okay, guys, let's get excited. In the chat, tell us where you're watching from and say hi to someone new. We miss you all, and we are so happy to have you today.
Good morning, DCC. I'm Fiamma. I'm part of DCC Youth, and I just wanted to welcome you. We're so excited that you've decided to join us online again this morning. We're going to sing a song. It's called Mighty God. It's about our great, great God that we serve that is just there for us through everything. The wind is watching every gesture of your hand. Waves of fear collapse at your command. I know tomorrow when the pressure rushes in, you'll be there to rescue me again. What a mighty God, what a mighty God you are. What a mighty God, what a mighty God you are.
Good morning, Dulles family. So I'm keeping it real here this morning. I have changed my message for this morning, and I just changed it. In fact, I just finished writing what I wanted to say just a few minutes ago. And this feels really very risky. My message, part 2 of the series, was ready. I felt great about it on Wednesday and Thursday. And I woke up this morning just knowing in my gut that I needed to just scrap that. We'll get back to that topic here in a couple of weeks and really speak to you about what's happening in our country and what's happening in my heart. This has already been a week where I've personally been grieving for the Staples family. Jeff and Kristen and Haley and Jack have been such important parts of the DCC family for so many years. And Jeff lost his father on Friday. And then the Kaiser family, who've been joining us here these three months of quarantine, and they've been with us at DCC many times over the years, lost their sister late Thursday night. And so our hearts here in this house have been really heavy. And I just want to say on behalf of DCC, Staples and Kaiser family, we love you and we're with you. And on top of all of that, I'm grieving what's happening in our country. Who would have thought a month ago, who would have thought a week ago that right now, today, this morning, COVID and the quarantine wouldn't really be what's stressing us out right now? That it would be the long, age-old crisis of racial division in our country. And, you know, that was one of my thoughts this morning, and I've been writing fast. I was out on my deck a little bit ago, just it started writing out my thoughts. I didn't think I was rewriting the message for this morning. And one of the thoughts that I wrote was, you know, we have 2 wars going on in our country right now. One is a recent war. It's the COVID war. It's the quarantine and the joblessness and the jobs crisis and everything related to the coronavirus, of course. But I think the much more serious war that's waging is not something that we've been battling for a couple of months. We've been battling it for a couple hundred years. And I believe God's at work. If we'll allow him right now. You know, I know we're concerned about the riots and there's different opinions about the riots. And I've just been rereading again what Martin Luther King Jr. said about riots. You could hear the tension in his voice where he's pushing back on riots that have become violent. And he's not advocating for that, certainly. But at the same time, he's trying to help the rest of society see that, you know, when injustice is happening and voices just go unheard, sometimes riot is the voice of the unheard, of the silent. And, you know, that's a tension I think we need to take real seriously here. I think a lot of good can come out of what's happened this week. And of course, you know, rioting can take your eyes off of the original issue. That horrific video, it has rattled our country. And we've had 2 videos in the last month. And if you count the Central Park video from a few days ago, which I found horrifying, it's really 3 videos from the last month that I hope and pray are awakening the white community to a pain that has been very real and I think very misunderstood by the white community, by African Americans for so long. And listen, I'm not trying to talk as an expert here. In fact, this month, my heart has really been, my intention has been to be a learner. And so I'm speaking to you and giving direction to you, particularly those of you who share my skin color, those of you who have the same skin color that I do. I'm really speaking to you and even challenging and being direct with you as a learner, because I believe that's ultimately what God's calling us to. Okay, let me reread some of the quotes that we read from Erwin's book, The Way of the Warrior. How relevant this book is now. I thought it was relevant because of everything related to COVID. More so, and since it was published last year, I think this is probably the time, the week, the month, the week that The Way of the Warrior is most relevant. I want to reread a few quotes from last week that I think are just really frame well what we're going to talk about for the next few minutes. Erwin wrote, and we read last week, we are a people of war because we are a people at war. All the violence we see in the world is a glimpse of the chaos, the stress, the turmoil that churns within us. We are a people at war because we are a people at war. Peace can only come when it is fought for. It does not come to the passive. Yet, Erwin goes on to say, the warrior is not ready for battle until they have come to know peace. That's what the warrior fights for. The warrior fights only for peace. And it's easy to conclude that the God of Scripture is a God of war. We spent time on this last week. Yet the opposite is true. God is a God of peace. We are the ones who brought war to the human story. And since then, God has been fighting for us to find our way back to peace. You may find it peculiar, Erwin said, to consider Jesus a warrior because after all, he is known as a man of peace. Yet you cannot properly understand Jesus if you do not grasp that his entire life's purpose was to win the greatest battle of the greatest war ever fought. God stepped into human history to fight for us. He did not hope for peace. God fought for peace. Sometimes the true mission of Jesus is misunderstood because he never carried a physical weapon in his hands. Yet if you want to see the true marks of Jesus as the warrior, you need to look at the scars on his hands, not the weapon in his hands, because there wasn't one, but the scars on his hands. In his death and resurrection, Jesus took upon himself all the violence of the world so he could bring all the world his peace. So I grew up in a home, and I hope this doesn't sound offensive, or I'm just going to trust these words here, and that they resonate with your heart. I grew up in a home in rural Virginia, Winchester, Virginia. It was mostly a white town. And yet, as a kid, I didn't think much of it as a kid. This was only really processed later as a teenager with our parents. I grew up in a home where frequently, it was just normal that sitting on our sofa watching movies were white people and black people. Sitting at our dinner table often were white people and black people. The laughter and the stories told, often African Americans were in our home, and they were our friends. Friends, we knew their stories, we knew their backgrounds, we knew their lives, and we were emotionally attached. And, I'm going to just kind of praise my parents here a little bit. My parents grew up in homes, both of them, where expressions like referring to African Americans as colored people, or just so many sayings, like, wow, she's really nice for a black person. And there was something in my parents, particularly in my mom. My mom really drove this intentional change, like, we are going to be a different home. We're going to fight for unity. I mean, I don't know if my mom ever used those words, but that's really what she demonstrated. Really, both of my parents did. We want to see people unified. And my brother and I just grew up with quite a few black friends, not thinking it was unusual. And to this day, some of my dearest, closest friends are African Americans. So it grieves me in particular when I hear statements by the white community and by white friends, and I'm going to put myself in this grouping, okay? I really know that I need to. This is as much an admission and an opening of my own heart as it is any kind of instruction to anyone. Something that I believe, are guilty of in the white community is thinking we have equality now. That's what the civil rights were all about. So what's the problem? We're all equal now. And for anyone who invests any amount of time, meaningful time, sincere time, understanding the story and experiences of the black community, you quickly learn that's not the case. We are not equal yet. And listen, if this is in any way different than your opinion, or you just don't see it this way, or you're like, why is Brad talking this way? Please just stay with me and please keep an open mind. about this because I believe God is leading you and me. And I am speaking more specifically to those who have the same color of skin that I have right now. Maybe mostly this morning I'm talking to the white community. I believe God is calling us right now to be agents of peace and peacemakers and peace builders. And it may surprise you the path that we have to take to become those peace builders. Okay, I wrote something on my out of my deck here just a few minutes ago, and it just came out of me really quick. I didn't revise it or edit it. I wrote it in just a few seconds, and I believe this. Racial division is the most persistent, most consistent crisis and threat that our country has ever faced. When you think about the Cold War and you think about Vietnam and you think about the world wars and pandemics, this pandemic that we're in, and financial crisis up and down and recessions, I believe this. I believe what supersedes all of those crises in our history and the crisis of the pandemic and what's happening with jobs right now, I believe the crisis that has been the most persistent and most consistent, the most consistent threat and crisis that we've ever faced as a country is racial division. And so how do we become agents of peace rather than just talking about this? And I don't want this to be just another talking head giving voice to what's happening here this week or our own opinions. I want to really get into the practical. What do we do to start solving this division, this problem in our country? So as a first step to that, I want to read from chapter 2 in Erwin's book. I wasn't planning to read from chapter 2 this week, but again, I'm just trusting the change that I felt really God's Spirit lead me to this morning will resonate with everyone. Okay, I'm going to read through parts of chapter 2 here pretty quickly. The weapon of the warrior is their wisdom. The New Testament is calling you and me not just to seek our own peace. That's really what we're ultimately craving in life. We were made to be people of peace and to thrive in peace, but we are also called in the New Testament to be agents of peace, to be expressions and extensions of Jesus' peace in this world. The weapon of the warrior is their wisdom. Wisdom, for our purposes, Erwin says in this discussion, for our purposes, wisdom will be defined as the ability to bring peace. The warrior wields a weapon only to defend, only to protect, and only to liberate. The warrior does not wield a weapon. The warrior knows in his wisdom that they are the weapon. You need skill to know how to shoot an arrow straight, but only wisdom can teach you how to never need to shoot the arrow. I love that, and in future weeks, I really want to try to come back to that. The greatest of warriors wins battles without their opponent ever even knowing a war has been waged. I love this. The warrior strives to be invisible. And that doesn't mean indifferent, and it doesn't mean passive. That's not what Erwin means. It means that we use our voice. We use the heart to dig into the root of the problem to bring about peace. And I want to talk for just a few minutes here. I don't think this is really going to go much longer, actually, maybe another 10 minutes here, to talk about how do we practically do this? How do we practically become people of peace? All right, I want to read to you from the New Testament. This is from 1 John. John is trying to help us understand, and he's really speaking, obviously, the inspired words of God here. I actually don't need my glasses for my iPad. I do for the book. But 1 John 3:14, we know that we have passed from death to life because we love each other. Anyone who does not love remains in death. So John's saying here that the sign that we've stepped out of chaos, that we've stepped out of death, that we've stepped into peace is when we love one another, when we're actually living out love for each other. Okay, but what does that look like? That's really the question. So what does love look like? Next verse, 1 John 3:15. Anyone who hates a brother or sister is a murderer. And you know that no murderer has eternal life residing in him. Turmoil and hurt and death are stealthy. You're not a murderer because you murder outwardly. In God's kingdom, you have a murderous heart. You're at death within. You have turmoil and chaos inside simply because of what you think. A lot of this battle and a lot of the battle to win the racial division that's in our country is going to be waged in areas of our thoughts that we didn't even think were racist or racial problems. I don't know a single white person who doesn't want unity. Maybe I do. I don't think I do. I don't think I know a single white person who believes they're a racist or they have racist thoughts and who doesn't want unity. And yet, God's telling us in the inner, deepest part of our thoughts is where a lot of division and a lot of turmoil originates. Okay, so again, the question, how do we love? What does love actually look like? And here's the verse that I want to really focus on. 1 John 3:16. This is how we know what love is. Jesus Christ laid down his life for us. And we ought to lay down our lives for our brothers and sisters. Jesus shows us what love looks like by doing the hard work, by putting love into action. Love isn't a feeling anymore. In our country, it can't just be, hey, we want unity. Jesus calls us to follow in his way of peacemaking and peace building by putting love into action. Love is the hard work of laying down our lives for one another. And Jesus went first and laid down his life for us, for his enemies, for those who crucified him, for those with sin, brokenness, jealousy, envy. That's all of us. Jesus laid down his life for those kinds of people, for his enemies. Wow, why can't we lay down our lives for people we want unity with? And maybe with people with different political views, of course, but people who have different experiences and backgrounds. If we collectively as human beings are those kinds of people, broken, full of chaos, full of insecurities and anxieties, and we cannot elevate others above ourselves like those kinds of people, wow, how much easier he's made it for us to see all of us as the kind of people that need unity with one another. That's what he's calling us to. All right, so again, I'm going to just bear with me as I just read here. I'm going to read from some of the notes I wrote just a little while ago. What does this look like now? What does laying down our lives for our brother practically look like this week, in our world, this month, this week? The way we are going to fight for peace is by engaging people with different skin color than our own, with different backgrounds, people with different backgrounds and different experiences than our own, and with different perspectives on the racial division in our country. I mean, it's going to take that kind of heart. There are some of us, and I am one of them, who for many years of my life just said, I don't get it. I don't get all the racial strife. I mean, that was what the Civil War was about, and that's what the Civil Rights Movement is about. We've made equality now. And man, I have had to come to terms with how wrong I have been and maybe still am about that. It's going to take that kind of courage and that kind of humility for us to really make progress in this fight for unity. We need to do this without defending ourselves, or not to defend and not to argue or debate. We're going to ask questions in order to listen and learn. And for the immediate moment, in the days and weeks ahead, I'm going to speak as a white man, challenging everyone with the same skin color as me. We put love into action by engaging African Americans, and really this extends beyond African Americans, but that's what's relevant right now this week because of what's happening in our country, and so I'm just going to continue with that language. We put love into action by engaging African Americans with the sole desire and heart, the soul desire and the soul heart to listen and to learn and to be open to how we've possibly been blind to, indifferent to passive about the singular greatest challenge that the United States has ever faced. So, here we go to make this practical this week. There were a lot of social media posts this week by so many white people, and on the one hand, I guess that's encouraging. On the one hand, it's really encouraging. I think it's a part of the awakening that's happening. But, if we're not careful, that can really cross the line into just jumping on board, really becoming part of the fad, what's popular this week. And I'll tell you how to avoid doing just for 1 week what's popular. And that is by moving from sympathy, like expressing statements of sympathy, into the space of empathy. And empathy is that part of a relationship where you relate. You relate to someone's hurt, someone's pain, someone's challenge, someone's experience, someone's background, to their story. Becoming empathetic, being able to identify with someone's different experience sounds like an oxymoron. And yet it's what God is calling us to. It is the hard work of love and action to move from statements or sentiments that are sympathetic to become people who say, I feel the pain. I identify with the pain now. I understand the hurt. Maybe so much so that we say, and I have inadvertently, unintentionally contributed to this hurt, just in my own ignorance, just in my inability or lack of willingness or ignorance to ask questions. Hey, tell me your story. Help me understand your experience. Help me understand your background. So that's how I'm going to wrap up here this morning. That's where we're headed in the weeks to come. And in the coming week, I am going to be interviewing, so please pay attention. If you are not a follower of DCC on Facebook, or we don't have your email address, please share that with us in the comment box, because in the coming days, we're going to have some conversation. The coming week, I'm going to say days and week ahead, I'm going to be having some conversations, engaging some of my close dear friends who are African American, to say, hey, I want to be a learner. I want to be someone who I need to know, for the sake of unity and peace, I need to know your story. And I need to know how maybe I have contributed to some of your pain without even meaning to. Maybe while ignorantly assuming we're all equal now. And this is going to be a powerful conversation. I did this actually with Joshua Simonette and with Alton. Many of you know Alton Bryant. About 3 or 4 weeks ago, just in the crisis that came out of the video in Georgia that was just so sickening, and the protracted injustice, I called these guys and said, can I just talk to you? I have thought for the longest time I understand your background and history, and really I don't, and I want to know more of your story. And we had the most amazing hour-and-a-half conversation. And so I want to do that again with all of you, DCC family, just collectively listening in. Maybe we'll do this in a way where we can ask questions and we can dialogue online. I'll try to figure that out. But that's where we're headed in the weeks ahead. Please just share your email address with us. Trust your email with us. We won't spam you. We won't overburden you with more and more digital content that we have filling our inboxes. We'll really try to just communicate with you in appropriate doses. But I want to be, in the days, the coming week, the coming month, really intentional of putting love into action, engaging. I'm speaking for the white community here, and as a white man, really intentionally engaging those in the African American community to say, help me understand your pain. Help me understand this division that we feel, and when these fires are ignited again every few years in our country, we all feel it all over again. Help me understand this from your perspective. Okay, I'm going to just pray, and I wrote out a prayer. I'm going to read this prayer this morning. Okay, so pray with me as we close out our time together here this morning. Okay, I wrote, Jesus, may we be people of action, people of actual real love, who put love into action. May we fight for peace the way you fought for peace. May we step into the hard work in more challenging space of empathy, taking on the hurts and pain of others to understand and share in their pain. And where we have been indifferent or passive, or maybe just silent or ignorant, where we have been passive, may we take the responsibility that we must own for not fighting for peace the way you are calling us to fight for peace, Jesus. Amen. Okay, what a different morning. I don't know how this is going to translate. I walked in from my back patio door just not too many minutes ago and said, I'm going to do a completely different message. I hope this, God, please let this translate well. I care about our country, but I care more about us getting the inner war that wages in us. And maybe that we perpetuate, without even knowing so, right and whole and complete, so that we can be people who don't just voice things on social media real quickly, that we become people who make peace. Imagine living in the generation. Imagine looking back on the COVID crisis and say, wow, we thought we were going into one of the worst crises in our lifetime, and we actually came out of it solving one of the greatest crises that we've ever known, certainly that our country has ever known. We got to be the people, the generation that made the change, that led us out of racial division into real unity, lasting unity. What a great vision that is. I want to be a part of it, and I'm going to fight for it. And I'm asking you to fight with me for this peace. Love you guys.